The sharp scent of bleach mixed with pine cleaner still clung to my skin as I dropped my keys onto the worn kitchen counter. It was nearly midnight. My back throbbed, my hands were cracked and sore, and all I craved was a hot shower and 6 solid hours of uninterrupted rest before the cycle began again. This exhausting routine was what my family believed I never escaped from. In their eyes, I was still stuck in the same life, a housekeeper living paycheck to paycheck, constantly teetering on the brink of burnout. I was the failure, the disappointment, the one who never measured up. And for a long time, I let them hold on to that belief. I played the part they expected of me, quiet, unremarkable, barely getting by. But what they didn't know was that every floor I scrubbed, every drain I cleaned, was a step in something far greater, something beyond anything they could ever dream. The old answering machine blinked red, 3 new messages. I pressed the button. One by one, the voices I knew too well filled the room. "Hey, Mandy," chirped Tessa, my sister, her voice sugary with that practiced condescension. "Just a reminder, Dad's birthday dinner is this Saturday. Make sure to be there at 6 o'clock. Not 7 like last year, okay? Try not to be late this time." Next message. "Madame," my brother's voice, smug and careless. "We're ordering from that fancy steak place for dinner, so maybe eat something before you get there. Probably not in your budget, huh, sweetie?" Third message. My father's voice, blunt and gravelly. "Don't bring one of your weird second-hand gifts this time. Just come, say happy birthday, and don't embarrass anyone." I stood there in silence, those words wrapping around me tighter than I wanted to admit. They believed they were being practical, maybe even generous. But behind every sentence was a judgment, a reminder of where they placed me on the social ladder, beneath them, barely holding on. They didn't know about the 4 companies I owned under shell corporations. They didn't know I crossed my first $1 million threshold 5 years ago. Or that just last week, Forbes reached out requesting an exclusive feature, the anonymous mogul who quietly built an empire behind closed doors. I hadn't answered yet, not because I was uncertain, but because I was ready. I had waited for this moment for a decade. It all began 10 years ago at that very dinner table when my father had looked me in the eye and muttered, "Pathetic girl, still cleaning houses." I was 23 at the time. Fresh out of a toxic relationship, broke, and unsure of anything. I had dropped out of college to take care of my grandmother, the only one who had ever truly been there for me. No one else in the family offered help. They were too busy scaling their pristine corporate ladders in finance, law, and marketing careers deemed respectable. When Grandma passed, I was left with nothing. No degree. No savings. No real plan. The only job I could land was cleaning homes. What started as a temporary gig soon became my only source of survival. Then one day, I cleaned for a woman named Evelyn Kane. She came from old money and carried herself with the kind of ease that only generational wealth allowed. But she was kind. And unlike anyone before, she noticed something in me. "You're clever," she remarked as I reorganized her chaotic filing system in under an hour. "Why waste that brain on mops and bleach?" I told her the truth, I couldn't afford to dream big. She chuckled softly and handed me a worn copy of The Lean Startup. That night, I read it from cover to cover. Then I read 5 more books like it. Something in me began to shift. I started setting my alarm an hour earlier to read. I listened to entrepreneurial podcasts while I scrubbed sinks. I studied how the wealthy lived, what they outsourced, how they structured their days. A thought began to crystallize. What if I didn't just clean homes? What if I reinvented the industry entirely? Created something high-end, tech-savvy, intuitive, designed for the very people I worked for? And so I did. I saved every spare dollar. I slept on a bare mattress in a shared apartment. My diet was mostly rice and eggs. For 12 months, I put in 14-hour days. And finally, I launched Clarity Living, a luxury home management firm offering everything from cleaning to concierge-level service, delivered by discreet, meticulously trained professionals who understood elegance and order. I told no one. Not my parents. Not my siblings. I didn't want their doubt infecting the vision. I just worked. 6 weeks in, I landed my first client, a tech investor in Beverly Hills. He referred 4 more. By the second year, I had 12 employees. By the third, we expanded to New York. By the 5th year, we were clearing $10 million annually. Yet at family dinners, I let Tessa drone on about her mid-level job in advertising. I let Mom slide coupons into my purse. I nodded as Dad scoffed at my vague references to entrepreneurship. They thought I was defeated. What they didn't know was that I was quietly building a legacy. Now, with Forbes set to air my interview live this Sunday, the very day of Dad's birthday dinner, the mask was about to come off. The headline would read, "Billionaire Housekeeper Turned CEO." They had no idea what was coming. The parking lot of the upscale Italian restaurant was already full by the time I arrived, pulling in behind a sleek black Range Rover. I sat in my old, unremarkable sedan for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, watching valets dart between cars beneath the soft glow of string lights. Technically, I didn't need to be here. I could have skipped the entire dinner and let the morning broadcast speak for itself. But part of me wanted to witness it. I wanted to see their faces, each raised eyebrow, every smug expression, so I could savor the impact when the truth landed. This would be the last night they ever looked at me like I didn't matter. I stepped out of the car, keeping my modest appearance intact. No one would suspect the woman behind the wheel owned a collection of luxury vehicles hidden in a private garage across the city. I handed my keys to the valet with a calm nod and walked inside. "Mandy!" Tessa's voice rang out like a bell dipped in syrup. She stood to greet me, arms wide with exaggerated warmth. "You're on time." I'm honestly surprised. I smiled politely. "Happy birthday, Dad." He barely lifted his gaze from the menu. "You look tired," he muttered. "Rough day cleaning?" There it was, the dig he had probably rehearsed the moment he knew I was coming. He didn't even bother hiding the smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. I felt a familiar burn rise in my chest, but instead of reacting, I returned a calm smile. "You could say that," I answered. Mom reached across the table and gently patted my hand. "We're just happy you could come. We know your job must keep you very busy." Busy? That was her word for overseeing 3 regional managers and closing international contracts with developers across 2 continents. But sure, let's call it busy. As the server approached to take our orders, Tessa launched into yet another long-winded story about a campaign she was working on. Something involving influencer outreach and a rising tech brand. She tossed her hair back like she was starring in a movie trailer. Then she turned to me with feigned interest. "So," she said, tilting her head, "how's the cleaning thing going?" I calmly took a sip of water. "It's expanding," I said smoothly. Dad let out a snort into his whiskey glass. "Must be nice. Just clean and move on. No pressure, no stress. Simple life." There was a time when comments like that would have shattered me. I would have gone home with a lump in my throat, wondering if I'd made the wrong choices. But not tonight. Not after everything I'd built. "Simple, yes," I replied with a small smile. "But surprisingly effective." The waiter returned with a bottle of wine and an assortment of appetizers. The conversation quickly shifted toward Jasmine's new promotion and Grant upgrading to a bigger house. I listened quietly while they congratulated each other, every now and then tossing me a glance that barely concealed pity. It was like a staged performance. Then Tessa rummaged through her handbag and pulled out her phone. "Did you all see the preview for tomorrow's Forbes Sunday Spotlight?" she asked as she scrolled. "They're profiling a woman who used to be a housekeeper. Apparently, she built some huge empire. Can you believe that?" I nearly choked on my drink. "What's her name?" I asked casually. She glanced down. Mandy Ree." The table went quiet. My mother blinked, processing. "Mandy Ree?" she repeated. Grant leaned in. "Wait a second, that's your name too, right?" Dad waved a dismissive hand. "Coincidence?" "No chance that's our Mandy." Tessa snorted, laughing. "Yeah, okay. Can you imagine? You." She pointed at me, laughter bubbling out. "From mops to millions." "No offense," she added quickly, "but you're not exactly Forbes material." I gave her a soft shrug. "None taken. You never really know who's out there building in silence." The irony of that moment was almost overwhelming. They were sitting inches away from the very woman who'd be featured on national television the next morning, completely unaware. The same woman they'd underestimated, criticized, and mocked for years. The night dragged on polite insults, fake compliments, overdone steak. I endured it because I knew that tomorrow would shift everything. After we finished singing and taking photos around Dad's cake, I rose from my seat. "Heading out already?" Dad asked, slicing into his tiramisu. "Early start tomorrow," I replied smoothly. "Work never really stops." "Toilets still need scrubbing, huh?" he said with a smirk. I smiled and said, "Something like that." As I headed for the exit, Tessa called out after me. "Hey, bring some gloves next time. Maybe you can clean my place while you're at it." I paused and turned slightly, offering her a smile layered with meanings she wouldn't begin to grasp. "See you tomorrow," I said. They assumed I meant brunch. I meant when their screens would glow with my face. When the world would finally learn who I was before my own family ever truly did. When the black Rolls-Royce parked out front would suddenly make perfect sense. Sunday morning arrived crisp and cloudless. Golden sunlight spilled across the floor of my penthouse suite, high above the bustling city. I stood by the towering windows, cradling a warm mug of coffee, watching as life unfolded far below. Sundays were usually peaceful, slow. But not this one. This Sunday was something else entirely. I turned up the volume on the flat-screen television mounted on the wall. The clock read exactly 8:58. The Forbes Sunday Spotlight countdown glowed in the lower corner. I had already seen the final cut twice, but I needed to watch it live. Not for myself, but for them, because I could picture it clearly. They were just now dragging themselves out of bed, brewing weak coffee, shaking off birthday wine hangovers, and flipping on the TV. Right on cue, the intro music swelled. Today we bring you the story of a woman who redefined the idea of success. A woman who built a billion-dollar company from nothing while hiding it from the very people closest to her. Meet Mandy Rhee, founder and CEO of Clarity Living. There it was. My name, my full name, spoken with weight and recognition. I inhaled slowly. The camera swept across the Manhattan headquarters, polished, modern, lined with glass. My company's logo gleamed behind the receptionist's desk. Then, a shot of me walking confidently through the lobby in a crisp white suit, heels tapping against the marble. My voice, clear and composed, echoed through the segment. Everyone assumed I was just a housekeeper. What they didn't see was the empire I was quietly building. The feature continued: client testimonials, interviews with my executive team, footage from the early grind, me with gloves, scrubbing countertops, stuffing flyers into mailboxes. Then came the big reveal. A list of cities: New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, London, Dubai. 6 continents. Over 300 employees. A valuation of $3.2 billion. I could see it now, Dad dropping his coffee in shock, Tessa's mouth hanging open, Mom gasping so loud it probably startled the neighbors. I'd left no trail, no hints, nothing to prepare them. Then came the closing scene. I stepped out of a Rolls-Royce in slow motion, sunglasses on, as a reporter called out. Why keep your success a secret for so long? I turned to the camera with a calm smile. Because real success doesn't need applause. And sometimes the most satisfying moment is watching the ones who doubted you realize they never actually knew you. The screen faded to black. I didn't even need to wait 5 minutes. My phone lit up in a frenzy: calls, texts, emails, voicemails, notifications across every platform. Then the family group chat began to buzz. Mom, Mandy, we just saw the segment. Is this actually real? Tessa, wait, what? This is you? Why didn't you tell us? Grant, holy crap, Mandy, you're in Forbes. When did this all start? Dad, we need to talk. Call me. I stared at the screen, letting the messages come in one after another. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't mind. As my phone continued to vibrate with messages I had no intention of answering, I made my way to the garage. My real car, a sleek, obsidian black 2024 Rolls-Royce Ghost, waited beneath the soft hum of overhead lighting. Its body gleamed like a mirror. I slid behind the wheel, pressed the ignition, and let the quiet roar of the engine settle around me. They had questions, of course. Dozens of them. But none of my answers would be delivered through a glowing screen or a choppy call filled with stammering apologies. No, today I was going to deliver those answers in person wordlessly. They would see them. They would feel them. And they would remember. I was returning to the same people who had laughed behind my back less than 24 hours earlier, but this time in a vehicle they once idolized from magazine covers. Wearing pieces from designers whose names they couldn't pronounce. And no longer as the family's black sheep, but as the woman the world was suddenly obsessed with. As I cruised through the tree-lined neighborhoods of my childhood, I thought about the many years I had swallowed my truth. Sat through smug comments and condescending remarks, quietly enduring the noise to protect what I was building. I didn't resent the silence. In fact, it had given me the space I needed to grow, to sharpen my edge. But that phase was over. I turned down their cul-de-sac, the same one I left behind years ago with a duffel bag, $0, and no direction. Children played tag in driveways, neighbors pruned hedges and sipped coffee. I imagined how quickly word would spread once they noticed the Rolls-Royce idling in front of the old Reeves house. I parked, exhaled, and stepped out into the sunlight. The front door creaked open before I could reach the porch. Mom stood there, pale and stunned, her mascara slightly smeared, eyes wide with disbelief. Mandy, she said, her voice barely audible. Is all of this true? I gave her a quiet smile and held up my phone. The Forbes headline still glowed across the screen. From housekeeper to billionaire CEO, the silent rise of Mandy Rhee. You tell me, I replied gently. The moment I stepped into the house, the air felt different, thicker. Like the walls were waiting for the conversation just as much as the people inside. Mom stepped back, blinking like she couldn't quite focus. Her hair was pinned up in a hurry and her blouse was wrinkled like she hadn't slept. Her voice trembled. Why didn't you ever tell us? Before I could answer, Dad appeared in the hallway. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time I could remember, he didn't look stern or judgmental. He looked unsure. Mandy, he said slowly, voice cracking. What the hell is going on? I walked past both of them without hesitation, heels tapping steadily on the hardwood. I took a seat on the familiar old couch, the one where I'd once curled up crying as a teenager after he grounded me for not changing my major. The same couch where he told me I was throwing my life away when I turned down a receptionist job at his friend's insurance office. Now I was worth more than everyone in his office building combined. They followed me into the room. Dad stood, arms folded across his chest, his jaw tight. Mom lowered herself into a chair like her legs could no longer hold her weight. 15 minutes later, Tessa and Grant rushed in, likely after catching up on the group chat chaos. Tessa looked dazed, her designer handbag swinging from her wrist like a forgotten prop. Mandy, she gasped. This whole time you were what? Living a double life. Grant, already seated, shook his head slowly. I googled you. Mandy Rhee. It's all real. You are Clarity living. I nodded. Yes, I am. Tessa blinked, her voice sharp. But you let us think you were barely scraping by. You let us believe you were broke. No, I said, my tone calm but firm. You chose to believe that. I never said I was broke. I just didn't correct you when you assumed I was. Dad's voice cut in. You drove that old junker. You wore second-hand clothes. You told us not to spend too much on your birthday. I met his gaze. Maybe because I never needed material things to define my value. Maybe I didn't care about labels. Maybe I just didn't want your approval. Tessa scoffed and rolled her eyes. Kind of ironic, don't you think? Coming from the woman who just rolled up in a $500,000 car. I leaned forward slightly, my expression unreadable. The car wasn't for me. It was for you. So you'd finally see me. Because if I had shown up in workwear from my corporate office or casually mentioned international real estate, you all would have laughed. You'd have dismissed me before I finished a sentence. Dad opened his mouth to respond but no sound came. I lowered my voice. You want to know what actually hurt the most? I asked, still looking at him. It wasn't the things you assumed. It was how quickly, how easily you believed I had failed. No one ever asked what mattered to me, what I was working toward. It was simpler to assume I'd lost than imagine I was building something extraordinary. The room fell quiet. Finally, Grant asked, but why hide it? Why keep us in the dark? We're your family. I turned to him. Do you remember when Grandma got sick? I left school to take care of her. You all said I was irresponsible, that I was destroying my future. But I didn't care. I owed her everything. She was the only one who ever believed in me without conditions. When she died, I had no money, no degree, nowhere to go. I paused, letting the silence return before delivering the final line exactly as required, rephrased, but unchanged in meaning. Not one of you offered help. Not a place to stay. Not even a word of encouragement. I said it softly, but the words hung in the air like a weight. Mom flinched. She didn't try to deny it, and that was confirmation enough. So, I continued. I started working. I cleaned houses. One of my clients saw potential in me. She handed me a book, and with it a chance. That simple chance turned into a spark. The spark became a vision. That vision grew into a business. And eventually that business transformed into a global brand. I paused, letting the silence draw itself out. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to spend years trying to earn your approval. I wanted to create something that mattered to me. And now that it exists, now that the world finally sees it, I wanted you to witness it too, not just hear about it. Tessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I honestly thought you were still just trying to figure things out, she muttered. I figured it out a long time ago, I replied gently. You just never looked closely enough to see it. Dad finally sat down. His shoulders slumped, his presence suddenly diminished. So what happens now, he asked. You rub it in? Is that what this is? No, I said, my voice calm and steady. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here because for once I want you to see me. Truly see me. And because tonight, I've arranged a dinner at the Paramount. Tessa's eyebrows drew together in confusion. The Paramount? You mean that exclusive rooftop place with the 6-month waitlist? I nodded. I own it now, I said simply. I reserved it for us. Private chef. Full staff. Entire top floor. We don't deserve this, Mom whispered, her voice cracking. Maybe not, I said softly. But I didn't do all this to punish you. I did it to prove something. I let my gaze drift around the room. That sometimes success doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet. It builds in silence. And then one day it shows itself not to shout but to stand. The elevator ride to the Paramount's penthouse level was thick with discomfort. My family surrounded me, staring at their reflections in the mirrored walls like they didn't quite recognize who they were anymore. Even Tessa, who normally thrived in elegant spaces, clung to her handbag with both hands, glancing around nervously. She hadn't said a word since we arrived. When the doors opened, we were greeted by a personal host. Good evening, Ms. Ree, he said with a warm nod. Your table is ready. We stepped into the dining room I had recently redesigned, a breathtaking space with glass walls revealing a panoramic skyline. A black marble table stretched across the room, illuminated by hanging pendant lights. In the corner, a string quartet played soft, melodic notes. It was lavish, yes. But tonight wasn't about wealth. It was about clarity, about making them see me, undeniably and fully. We took our seats as the servers moved with practiced grace. The ambience was stunning, but I kept my expression composed. Mom leaned toward me, voice hushed. Mandy, this place is unreal. I nodded. It's my favorite view in the city, I said. It reminds me of how far I've come. Dad scanned the room, clearly overwhelmed. This is a lot. It's not about excess, I said. It's about finally showing you what was always right in front of you. Each place setting included a custom menu with the guest's name printed in gold foil. Next to each one sat a sealed envelope. I waited until the wine was poured in. The first course, lobster risotto, was placed on the table. Then I spoke. Before we begin, I'd like each of you to open the envelope in front of you. They looked at me in confusion, but eventually followed my lead, carefully peeling the seals. Tessa reacted first. Her eyes widened and she let out a breath. Inside her envelope was a simple comparison. One column listed her annual salary, the other, my daily passive income. Her number was completely eclipsed. At the bottom of the page was a small note. This accounts for only 2 of 8 revenue streams. She folded the page with trembling hands. Grant's envelope held an email from 4 years ago, one I had sent to his investment firm under a pseudonym, offering a chance to buy into Clarity Living. His team's reply had politely declined, stating that residential services lack scalability. Below that was a small line in bold. The $100,000 offered then would be worth $17.4 million today. He looked up slowly, pale. Mandy. I didn't know it was you. I know, I replied. That's why I never took it personally. Mom opened her envelope next. Inside was a detailed list. Every occasion I had asked for belief, for support. Invitations to art shows I'd paid for while still cleaning houses. A request for a co-sign loan to start a business. Every line marked, declined. At the bottom, a photo of my first office, small, bare, but entirely self-funded. Her hand shook as she pressed the photo to her chest. Dad's envelope was the thinnest. One single page. A screenshot of the Forbes homepage. He stared at it for a long time, as if trying to absorb what it really meant. Finally, his voice broke through the silence, low, gravelly, and almost unrecognizable. I was wrong, he said. I thought I knew everything. But I didn't know you at all. I looked directly at him. You only saw what you wanted to see. A daughter who didn't follow your path. So instead of asking why, you assumed I had lost my way. He nodded slowly. And for the very first time in my adult life, my father looked truly, deeply remorseful. Dinner ended not with noise or boasting, but with an unfamiliar stillness. No lectures, no passive-aggressive jabs, just quiet reflection. After dessert, chocolate soufflé delicately drizzled with raspberry, I stood and stepped toward the large screen at the end of the room. I'd like to show you one last thing, I said softly. The lights dimmed. A presentation flickered to life. Photos filled the screen, snapshots of my journey. Me scrubbing bathtubs, mopping hardwood floors. Me sleeping on the ground, books stacked around my makeshift bed. The tiny space that became Clarity Living's first office. A company retreat in its early days. My first apartment with central heat. My first Forbes magazine cover. Each image carried a caption. Some were pulled from headlines. Others were quotes from old texts and emails sent by my family. "You're wasting your life. Maybe try community college next semester. Mandy needs to get real." Then the final slide appeared. A photo of me at 23, standing in our kitchen beside my grandmother, smiling shoulder to shoulder. Below the photo, a single sentence. "She believed in me when no one else did." I turned back to them. "This wasn't about revenge," I said. "It was about truth." I paused. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm not asking for apologies. But I am asking you to stop pretending I was ever less than I am." No one said anything. The silence felt sacred. Then Mom stood, her face streaked with quiet tears. She walked to me and wrapped her arms around me tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Not just for failing to see you, but for never even looking." I held her close. "Thank you," I said softly. "That's all I ever wanted." The music swelled around us, the skyline glowing just beyond the glass. And in that moment I realized this wasn't just a dinner. It was a reckoning. Maybe even a beginning. A full week passed after that night at the Paramount, and still the world hadn't stopped talking. The media storm was relentless. My inbox flooded with offers, partnerships, podcast invitations, book deals, proposals from investors. I had just been named one of Forbes' most influential women of the year, and was scheduled to give a keynote at a global innovation summit. But the fame, it wasn't what kept me up at night. It was the quiet that followed. The strange, unfamiliar stillness after a lifetime of noise, of striving, of fighting to prove myself. And then suddenly realizing I had already arrived. I sat on the terrace of my brownstone, a home my family didn't even know existed. It was more modest than the penthouse. Ivy crawled up its stone walls. A small fountain gurgled nearby. The peace of it felt earned. At my side, Maple, my gentle old rescue dog, lay curled and content. She didn't care about headlines or balance sheets. She just wanted me present. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Dad. "Saw your TED Talk. You were incredible. I wish I'd listened to you sooner. Proud of you, Mandy. Truly." I stared at the screen for a while, unsure how to respond. His words didn't erase everything. The years of dismissal, the unspoken judgment, but they meant something. A first stone placed on a new bridge. Another notification pinged. Forbes live interview. Starts in 20 minutes. I glanced at the clock. Just enough time. I stepped inside and changed. No stylist, no glam team. Just a soft blouse and worn jeans. No designer heels. No curated image. Just me. Because at long last I had earned the right to be fully myself on camera or off. I joined the virtual call. The host greeted me with a wide grin. "Mandy Ree. Thank you so much for joining us." "Glad to be here," I replied. "We've seen an enormous response to your story. Millions have followed along. But there's one question everyone keeps asking," he said. "What made you keep going? Especially when even your own family didn't seem to believe in you." I thought for a second, then smiled. "You don't need everyone to believe in you," I said. "You just need one person. And sometimes that person has to be you." He nodded. "And if you could go back in time and speak to the version of yourself in that tiny apartment cleaning houses, what would you tell her?" I felt my throat tighten. I'd tell her it's okay to feel invisible. That sometimes being unseen is a gift. It gives you space to grow, room to build in peace, without judgment, without interruption. And when the time is right, you won't have to announce your success. You'll just arrive. And the world won't be able to look away. The interview wrapped. I sat there for a while in the quiet, letting everything settle in my chest like a final exhale. That afternoon I drove to the cemetery. It had been too long. The sun cut through the branches as I stepped onto the familiar path. I knelt before my grandmother's headstone, brushing leaves gently away before placing fresh tulips in the vase. Her favorite. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. "You were right. About everything." From my purse, I pulled out something fragile, the original Clarity Living flyer I had printed 10 years ago. I'd made it at a 24-hour cafe, hands shaking from fear and caffeine and hope. I laid it beside the stone. "We made it," I said quietly. That evening, back at the penthouse, I hosted a small dinner. No cameras. No investors. Just a few people who had believed in me when I had nothing but fire in my chest: my first employee, my college best friend, and Evelyn Kane, the woman who gave me the lean startup and told me I was more than what I cleaned. We laughed past bottles of wine, dreamed aloud. For the first time in years, I felt no need to perform, no desire to prove anything. I was just me. Later, as the city lights glittered across the glass, my phone buzzed again. A new message in the family group chat. "Mom, next Sunday is our turn. Dinner at our place. You don't need to bring anything, just you. And if you're open to it, maybe you could tell us more about what you're building. We want to learn." Finally, I smiled. There was no confetti, no standing ovation, just a quiet understanding, a slow unraveling of the old version of me they'd all written off. Because I hadn't just transformed my life, I had rewritten the entire story. From forgotten housekeeper to self-made mogul. From invisible daughter to undeniable force. And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful kind of revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be.